So thank you again, everyone, for joining. This is Dekel Gelbman. I'm the CEO of FDNA. We invited everyone to talk today about the recent paper that we published in Nature Medicine earlier this month around our artificial intelligence framework called DeepGestalt, a framework that allows us to identify facial phenotypes of genetic disorders. Today, I'm joined by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Gripp, and our Chief Technologies Officer, Yaron Gurovich. Both are leading authors on this paper. Our purpose is to go a little bit deeper into the publication and give you the opportunity to ask us some questions. With that, I'd like to begin by setting the stage and talking a little bit about the context of DeepGestalt, why we've started it, and where this new algorithm fits into the landscape of genomics. It's our vision and our belief that the future of healthcare is going to be precision medicine or precision health. We think that the recent years have shown that big data is going to play a key role in identifying new patterns, discovering new diseases, making recommendations to physicians and to patients, and overall improving the patient outcomes and results. We also believe that genomic data is going to be significant in that future. You can't really get much bigger in big data than genomic data. And we believe that we're on the cusp of a revolution here. Looking at the past few years, over a decade, and trying to analyze the trends in the genomic sequencing space, we've seen that prices have decreased significantly. The quality has increased, and so has the volumes of genome sequenced around the world. And what we also see, and correlated to that trend, is that as we sequence more genomes, we discover more and we enhance our knowledge base. The more we discover, the more markers we detect, and the better diagnostics become, as well as the basis for discovering and developing new treatments. In essence, and the bottom line is, we believe that next generation sequencing is becoming the standard of care, or the new standard of care, both in research and clinical settings. But there's still much to be done, and we're only at the beginning. If we've seen a lot during this 15 years around genome sequencing, we have not seen a lot around phenotyping. And it's becoming more and more clear by the day that phenotyping is really significant when it comes to interpretation and understanding the results that we get from genome sequencing. As I said, we're just at the beginning, and we expect over the next 5 to 10 years to discover so much more information. With that in mind, our group has determined a mission for ourselves in focusing on phenotyping and bringing the same level of revolution that genome sequencing has seen into phenotyping. Primarily, we're focusing on using AI to analyze big data, to structure phenotypic data that is currently unstructured, and to integrate that into genomics. Our first step, our first AI model, is called DeepGestalt. It is called DeepGestalt because we use a new method called deep learning, which is at the forefront of artificial intelligence today. This article or publication in Nature Medicine describes the work that we've done around DeepGestalt, describes how we use facial images of patients to correlate those images to clinical features with high significance in the diagnostic process, to diseases, and even to the underlying genetics of those diseases. The results that we achieve with DeepGestalt are extremely high, and they're indicative of the future of AI with facial images, with other images, and with other phenotypic signals, and it's just the beginning. At this point, I'd like to refer to Gripp, our Chief Medical Officer, to talk a little bit more about how DeepGestalt is being used today in the clinical workflow and is expected to be used in the future. Thank you. Karen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Karen Gripp. I'm a pediatrician and clinical geneticist. I'm the chief of the Division of Medical Genetics at the AI DuPont Hospital for Children in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm also the chief medical officer for FDNA. Let me explain how this relationship with FDNA developed. I was an early user of DeepGestalt in my own clinic, and I was impressed by its capabilities. And so I began to use it for my own clinical research. So I became a scientific collaborator with FDNA and joined the scientific advisory board. And because the technology and the potential of DeepGestalt is so compelling, I continued to stay very involved, and I became the CMO for the company. As a clinical geneticist, I see patients with growth, physical, and developmental differences that may be genetic in origin. And it is my role to assess the patient's phenotype. Phenotype means the manifestations of an underlying condition. And this is so important in order to make a diagnosis and ultimately provide the right care. So when you look at this graph here, it shows that there are thousands of syndromic conditions caused by mutations, and the numbers are ever increasing. Some of these genetic syndromes have distinguishable facial features, and these features can help a geneticist to identify specific conditions. But clinical experts can be somewhat limited in their ability to recognize every syndrome based on their own personal experience, and sometimes conditions present with a very subtle presentation, and one might miss those very subtle signs. So DeepGestalt can be a very useful clinical tool that can shorten the diagnostic odyssey for many of these patients that are still out there looking for a diagnosis. So let me give you an example. A little while ago, a family came to my clinic. They had a young boy, and they were looking for a diagnosis. He had been born with low birth weight and required several surgeries. He continued to have poor growth and a small head circumference. He had mild developmental and mild learning problems. Overall, his facial features did not appear unusual to me. I was able to use DeepGestalt in clinic, and it immediately listed a number of syndromes. The most closest match to my patient was a condition called Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome. And I was able to perform targeted testing just for that condition. Ultimately, the patient was diagnosed with exactly that condition. So this is one example of how DeepGestalt picked up on very subtle signals based only on the facial features. I had not given the system any additional information on the patient, but because the patient's presentation overall fit with this condition, I pursued testing for this one condition. This is an example how DeepGestalt does not replace the geneticist. It does not replace molecular genetic testing, but it's a support tool with great capabilities. The phenotype information, or next generation phenotyping, is incredibly important, and it needs to be used in order to complement the next generation sequencing data. So on this graph here on the left-hand side, you see the columns. The column to the far left shows the diagnostic grade when one looks at exome data using only the information that's available about the mutations or variants themselves. That's 16%. In the middle, you see the results if you combine the molecular variant results with clinical features. So these are terms that we use to describe findings. Then when we use this together, the diagnostic grade goes up to 50%. Now on the right, if we also add in the DeepGestalt analysis of the facial features, you see that the diagnostic grade using all of these things together goes up to 90% for the top 1 accuracy. On the right side of the graph, you see similar results for top 10 accuracy. Top 10 accuracy looks at the top 10 number of syndromes that might affect the patient. So this is more similar to a clinical differential diagnosis. So this is an example for how detailed phenotype information or next generation phenotyping improves the diagnostic grade with high-level genetic testing. And DeepGestalt paves the way for this efficient phenotype assessment. It is cost-effective, and it's very effective in sharing the data easily with molecular labs and improving diagnostic rates. So DeepGestalt really affects medical care. I've already given you an example about how it can be used in clinical care. What's also important to acknowledge is that there's often a disconnect between the clinical information that's available to us in the clinic itself and the amount of information about the patient or about the phenotype that gets transferred into the laboratory setting where the next generation sequencing data is available. So when we apply this next generation phenotyping, we can use the same AI tool to easily transfer and apply this information to the next generation sequencing data. And this will lead to improved level of diagnostic rates with this high-level genetic testing. So it improves efficacy, cost effectiveness, and it's quite scalable. We have shown the power of DeepGestalt applied to facial analysis. And we see this really as a proof of principle of the strength and importance of AI when it's applied to healthcare in the bigger picture. The promise of personalized medicine can only be fulfilled if the large amount of next generation sequencing data is analyzed in the context and in consideration of each patient's specific phenotype. Therefore, this next generation phenotyping through AI tools provides a level of precision in phenotyping and is scalable at low cost for the large amount of patients and data that will need to be analyzed in the future. So we have shown the great power of DeepGestalt for next generation phenotyping using facial photographs, but I see this really as just one example of DeepGestalt's potential. AI tools will be used to analyze other aspects of the patient's phenotype. For example, imaging studies, gait analysis, or vital signs over time. And this will be just as powerful and just as critical for personalized medicine because the genotypic data, just like any other set of lab data, imaging data, are meaningful only when seen in the context and the relationship of the individual patient and the patient's medical history. So I think that FDNA will continue to lead the field in next generation phenotyping, and that this application of DeepGestalt to facial analysis is only the first example of its capabilities. Lastly, I want to thank the numerous international collaborators that use DeepGestalt. This worldwide use of the technology has allowed us to develop this powerful tool that is really a community effort and that will be able to benefit patients worldwide. And this could not have been done without the worldwide participation of clinics and labs. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yaron. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at FDNA, and I lead a team at FDNA that worked on the paper in Nature Medicine. My background is machine learning and computer vision, and I have been working on applying my knowledge in the genetic space for more than 6 years now. And I would like to tell you more about how DeepGestalt works. Let's start with a look on the results. Overall, DeepGestalt achieves 91% top 10 accuracy in identifying the correct syndrome on 502 images and outperformed experts in 3 additional experiments. This is the first instance of using this type of technology in this field, and these results show that it adds significant value to the phenotypic evaluations in clinical genetics. We see in the second experiment, which focused on identifying genes related to Noonan syndrome, that we were able to achieve 3 times better results than experts in this field. In addition, we show superior results to the clinical experts in 2 binary experiments with Cornelia de Lange syndrome and Gelbman syndrome. To better understand how the system works, we should start looking on the problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to take a photo and start with a photo and eventually provide a prioritized list of probable syndromes. And to do so, we use deep learning algorithms. Our deep learning algorithm is called DeepGestalt, which is based on deep convolutional neural networks. We use a transfer learning approach to allow learning from a relatively small database. To do this, we use a community-driven platform in which uploaded images are analyzed in a non-identifiable manner, and the data is used to further train the syndrome recognition. To better understand the challenge we have to deal with, we should look on the data. This field has relatively small data. It is very hard to collect patient data for rare diseases. The amount of patients diagnosed for each disease varies a lot, which results in having databases with large variation for the number of patients per class. The ethnic diversity exists within the same disease and requires robustness of the algorithm as well. Lastly, there is a need to support many diseases as the amount of rare diseases is very large. If we compare this challenge to a face recognition task, we will see that in face recognition, there is a need to address intra-person variation, such as shading, age, glasses, haircuts, illumination, pose, variation, occlusions, and rotations. In our task, we deal with intra-syndrome variation, which, in addition to the previous challenges, requires also dealing with identity variations. And we can see examples in this slide. To build this algorithm, we used FacetoGene, a community-driven platform facilitating a symbiotic relationship where real clinical experts use our algorithm, improving the value in their clinical workflow, and provide more data to train our system. It is currently the fastest growing phenotypic repository in the world, which continues to grow as clinicians, labs, researchers use DeepGestalt. To conclude my part, I would like to mention that in addition to the publication of this algorithm, we see great value in promoting research in this field. With this study, we've created a new benchmark that will allow other researchers to further develop algorithms and AI technologies to advance precision medicine on a global scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gripp. Thank you, Yaron, for diving a little bit deeper into both the clinical aspects of DeepGestalt as well as the artificial intelligence and technological aspects of DeepGestalt. To summarize the webinar before we go into specific questions, I'd like to say that when we talk about artificial intelligence, there's a very rough and typical classification into narrow AI versus general or strong AI. The former being a classification of AI in its ability to address and perform very narrow tasks like facial recognition or identification of very specific patterns in data. And indeed, AI has proven over the last few years its strength in performing such narrow tasks much better than human beings can do. The ability to go through vast amounts of data and underlying patterns that human beings are simply not equipped to do is a field where AI brings a lot of value. As opposed to that, when we talk about general AI and maybe a little bit of hype around how robots are going to replace human beings in their occupations, I think that, if at all, is decades away. But there's a new classification that we love to talk about, and that is the integration between human beings and AI. There's a new breed of human beings that are superhuman beings that are augmented by artificial intelligence. Those are individuals that, in order to perform their occupations, use tools based on artificial intelligence to perform their tasks. That synergy between the artificial intelligence ability to go through data and output patterns and the human cognitive ability of interpreting that pattern and delivering services, I think is really where we're going in the next few years with AI. both Karen and Yaron alluded to the fact that DeepGestalt is just the beginning. We believe that the future of phenotyping is bright, especially when considering that so many groups are utilizing AI. If we are able to influence this field by producing and generating more AI ourselves, but also by incentivizing and serving as pioneers in this field so that other groups can develop additional phenotyping tools, the vision of next generation phenotyping is going to be fulfilled. We are already planning, setting the stage and developing tools like medical image analysis, vital sign analysis, voice analysis, video analysis, and combining all that with natural language processing to be able to scan through clinical notes, whether dictated or written by human beings, and combine all that together in order to achieve superior variant identification for clinical purposes and research purposes. The key value that we believe this industry can gain from these type of developments are across the board. We already see that clinicians are using DeepGestalt and similar technologies to support their decision process, to select better genes for testing, to be able to streamline patients and conduct research. We're seeing genetic testing labs and bioinformatic companies integrating phenotypic information into the analysis and achieving quicker turnaround times and more accurate results with the interpretation of exome and whole genome sequencing. We're seeing innovative research groups in pharma companies and academic settings using phenotype and genotype analysis in concert to discover new diseases and better characterize known diseases. And finally, we also see an endeavor to use these type of AI tools to discover patients in the real world, whether it's for earlier diagnosis of patients or for better recruitment into clinical trials. These efforts in concert altogether will have an impact. Maybe it will take a few years, but will have an impact on the overall state of precision health and the outcomes of patients. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. I would encourage you all to share your questions with us. I know that we've already had a few very interesting questions submitted to us. Kristen will go through these questions and share them with us, and we'll try to answer to the best of our abilities.
Great, thank you all. Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you again everyone for joining us. Again, my name's Kristen. I'll be facilitating some of the questions that we have here for the last few minutes. To start off, as a clinical user, what do you find to be the most significant about this study?
The first thing that I would stress is that this study produces objective measurements for how good this tool really is. As a clinician, we keep questioning, how good is it? Are we not trained much better? So this is really an objective assessment of how good the tool is.
Great, thank you. Yaron, do you plan to expand on this study in the future?
Yes, we're already in the process of publishing our next algorithm that utilizes DeepGestalt and combines it with genomic information to prioritize genes. This study is called Pedia, and it's currently in a review process, also available in bioRxiv in self-application.
Great, thank you. Dekel, the technology already performs well on various ethnicities, but do you have other plans or projects in the works to further improve?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that question. This is a matter that is not only important, I think, worldwide, but really close to our hearts here at FDNA. We often talk about the ethnic disparity when it comes to genetics. Over the past few years or decades, the knowledge base that was accumulated in the world of genetics is significantly biased towards European descendants. Although there's a lot of information about them, the populations of other ethnicities that represents huge population around the world are not represented. Our contribution to that effort and what we can do is to try at least to balance our database, our knowledge base around phenotypes. And indeed, by making our community platform, FacetoGene, available worldwide free of charge, we were able to tap into what we call emerging markets around the world, whether it's in Africa, Latin America, Far East, Eastern Europe, sorry, and the Middle East. These are all regions that we believe are underrepresented in the knowledge base of genetics and phenotype. So we've done a lot in terms of trying to provide our tools and distribute them to these regions of the world. But even more than that, we collaborate with many patient advocacy groups and many research activities that are focused specifically on different regions in the world so that we can proactively collect more data and really balance this knowledge base.
Great, thank you. Back to Dr. Gripp. How often do you consult the technology in your day-to-day, and what advice might you have for someone looking to implement an AI solution in their work?
So I use it almost every day. I don't see patients every day, but I use it most of the time when I see a patient. And I would have to say it's important to use it within the regulatory guidelines. Certainly this tool is completely compliant with the GDPR and the HIPAA regulations, but it needs to be used in the appropriate manner. So that needs to be established. And then I would say use it frequently, because at times the tool surprises me in what suggestions it can make. It can bring up suggestions that I had not considered before. So it's really an additional objective assessment that can help the geneticist when the geneticist doesn't quite realize that there are other things to consider. So I would recommend to use it regularly because it really is a helpful tool.
Great, thank you. And actually, we just received a follow-up question to that. How easy is it to implement in your clinical workflow, and which top syndromes do you believe would benefit from this?
So it is easy to incorporate into the workflow. The way I myself use it is that I have a hospital-issued iPhone, so I have a device that has been cleared for use in context of patient information. The app itself can be downloaded on the phone. That's very straightforward. And then in clinic, what I do is I take a photograph using that app. So it's as easy as taking a picture on the iPhone. It's literally that straightforward. And then there is a desktop tool as well, where you can, if you want to further dive into the patient, the findings, I often use it on the desktop. So it's very interchangeable, easy to use, and portable. I believe that a number of syndromes will benefit from this, and I can't really say specifically one group. The next big step I see as using this tool to transfer as much clinical information as we have on the patient in a cost-effective, meaningful way to the molecular lab that has the next generation sequencing data. These two data sets often are very disjointed and disconnected. But if we use this tool, it has built in the capability of sharing the summarized data with the molecular diagnostic lab. I think that is where the next big step will come in improving exome-based genetic diagnosis, because you do need the detailed phenotypic information, and this is the most effective way of gathering that information.
Great, thank you. Yaron, when designing the technology, did you consider its ability to work on a quote-unquote healthy person, or was this always intended to be used later in the diagnostic process?
Thank you for your question. Our target application is meant to be used by clinical experts, for which the value resides in determining the list of possible syndromes rather than determining if a patient has a condition, any condition or not. This is why we focused from the beginning on the problem of listing the list of syndromes, and it is not currently in the scope of our work to diagnose a healthy person or not healthy person. But it's something we can do, but it's not part of our application, and it's not in our scope.
Are you planning to release any other products or technologies in the future?
Yeah, well, the webinar is primarily about DeepGestalt, not about the commercial products that we have, but I'll try to refer to it. As I presented, we have a roadmap of technologies that we're planning and actually developing, sorry, at this point of time. Our next framework, artificial intelligence framework, is going to be around clinical note assessment. That's something that's already in a product mode. It's being tested currently by clinicians. And later on, we're already working on some very interesting stuff of identifying patterns within MRIs and X-rays, linking them to genetic disorders. These features are going to be first and foremost introduced through our community-driven platform, so that it could be shared with our community of users. There's also some product that we're releasing on a licensing level, where we're actually integrating this technology into other systems, such as genetic testing requisition forms, variant analysis platforms, as well as clinical data warehouses or electronic medical records, so that they can tap directly into the information in those other systems to perform the analysis.
Great. This could be directed to Dr. Gripp, or really any of the participants. Is the software predicted to replace in the near/far future clinical geneticists?
Well, maybe I'll take that before Dr. Gripp answers that. And I think one of my last slides was an answer pretty much to that point. The software is not intended to replace clinicians, nor do we believe that AI can replace clinicians. This is not an occupation that is going to be obliviated from the world with AI. In fact, we believe that we are creating, in the process of creating over the next few years, a new breed of physicians who are using AI, and those may replace physicians who are not using AI, but that's our intention, and that's the ability of AI. Dr. Gripp, you're welcome to add to that.
Yes, I fully agree. I see this as an incredibly helpful tool, but not a replacement. You will always need a human to, one, assess the big picture to be sure that all the data you get makes sense in the context of the patient. And two, you need somebody to talk and relay this information. So I don't think that the clinical geneticists will be abolished or replaced by artificial intelligence, but I think it will really make our work much more effective and efficient, and I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect. As for the genetic variants, is there a database of biometric data from individuals considered/assessed as not having dysmorphic features from different ethnicities, which is used by the software to compare and assess facial features?
So when we input a new patient, when we put the data in, there is an option to include the ethnic ancestry, so that information can be provided to the system, but it might not always be available and isn't always provided to the system. I understand why you're asking. However, what we have found when we tried this is that the system is actually quite good at recognizing the syndrome-specific traits independent of the ethnicity. So certainly it is not unbiased currently, because it depends on if you have enough images of different ethnicities to train the system, you can eventually completely take out the bias for the syndromes, but it has been shown that actually the syndrome recognition remains very good despite different ethnicities.
Great. Also, we have another one that just came in. Is there a risk of bias for newer data interpretation performed with the help of DeepGestalt based on how previous data has been interpreted so far?
I think that the question is really good, specifically where we deal with our application, and we take that data that was added to our community-driven platform. But internally, we are able to build the benchmarks in the right way so that it will not be biased to previous data. And we are able to test where we have maybe a bias, and then we know that we need to invest in it and we fix it. So it's in our workflow of development.
So there's a risk, but you're aware of it and you're addressing it. That's the answer. Okay, well, I think that with that, our Q&A section is coming to an end. Thank you, both Dr. Gripp and Yaron Gurovich, for presenting your sections on DeepGestalt and for working so hard on making that publication. If you do have further questions, you are more than welcome to send them on to us at marketing@fdna.com or to each of the emails that was presented by the presenters today. Thank you again, and hope to see you all very soon with other big news